Just a few episodes in, and House of the Dragon has already proven itself as one of the greatest shows on air at the moment, very obviously following in the footsteps of its predecessor. And while people believe that the Game of Thrones spin-off might find it hard to gain traction after the disaster that was the finale of the main show, the prequel seems to be faring just fine on its own. As every episode unravels a new chapter in the Game of Thrones lore and leads us deeper inside the politics that goes on inside the Targaryen family, the fans are now waiting with bated breath to see exactly what it is that will lead us to the infamous Dance of the Dragons. But before we get to any of that, how exactly is the House of the Dragon going to bring all this magic onto the big screen? Is CGI enough to do justice to the original source material? Or is the audience too smart to fall for these gimmicks now? Stay tuned till the end of the video for all of this and more. A Dynasty of Dragons. House of the Dragon takes place roughly 200 years before the events of the original show, and while the prequel does take us back to the familiar settings of Westeros, the Seven Kingdoms, and of course the Iron Throne. What stands out is the fact that this show is based solely around the Targaryen house, decades before the Targaryens were reduced to what they were when we first see the pilot of Game of Thrones. The family ruled the Seven Kingdoms for years, starting with Aegon the Conqueror, who, as you might have guessed, conquered the land and laid down the foundations of the realm. After Aegon, several generations of the Targaryen retained the key to the kingdom until it was time for King Aerys II to take the throne. Aerys was Daenerys' father and the 16th Targaryen to sit on the Iron Throne before he descended to insanity and was remembered in history as the Mad King. Aerys II was dethroned by Robert Baratheon, who was the king of Westeros when Game of Thrones first started. But everything that led up to that point, including a massive civil war within the Targaryen clan for the claim to the Iron Throne, is going to be part of House of the Dragon. And all these origin stories are what make the show so interesting to watch. Dance of the Dragons. Speaking of the Targaryen clan, right off the bat, we know that the first season of the show is going to revolve around themes of power and succession, as the narrative picks up in 103 AC. Westeros is being ruled by King Viserys I, who wants to find someone to succeed the throne after him. However, when his unborn son and wife pass away in a tragic turn of events, the question then comes down to his firstborn, Princess Rhaenyra, who is a direct descendant of Daenerys, and his brother Daemon, who is willing to do anything he can to take over as king. This will, of course, ensue in a grand power struggle within the family as we see who finally gets to rule the Seven Kingdoms. But of course, that's not going to happen before the Dance of the Dragons takes place. Dance of the Dragons is an all-out civil war that breaks out within the multiple factions of the Targaryen clan, as all of them battle it out to earn their place as the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. The struggle kicks off when Viserys is chosen as heir to the throne after his grandfather, skipping over his cousin, Princess Rhaenys, who was much more entitled to the kingdom. Then, years later, we have Viserys' brother Daemon and his daughter Rhaenyra at the same cornerstone when the King's Hand Serrato Hightower decides to name Rhaenyra as the heir to the throne. And things only get complicated from here onwards, since after the death of his wife Aemma, King Viserys decides to take on a second wife who is Ser Otto's very own daughter, Lady Alicent. And if we go by the Fire and Blood series upon which the show is based, when Alicent gives birth to multiple sons with the king, this is when the Targaryens are split into two. Despite now having male heirs, the king still names Rhaenyra his heir, causing a major rift in the Targaryen house. This clash is what ensues in the Dance of the Dragons, where bloodlines upon bloodlines of the Targaryens are wiped out, their dragons killed, and their kingdom destroyed. But who wins this brutal civil war? Well, you will have to watch the show to find out. The Mighty 17. With a storyline as intense as this, we already know that House of the Dragon is going to be much more intense than Game of Thrones ever was. The entire first season is going to be building up to the major conflict, and while we might not see the Dance of the Dragons in the initial 10 episodes, you best believe that blood will be shed and dragons will be involved in the ordeal. Speaking of dragons, the fans waited season after season for the creatures to make an appearance in the original show. With all the dragons in the world presumed dead, it was quite the sight to see Dany riding into King's Landing on one and wreaking havoc like never before. And of course, all of that was only possible through the help of a little movie magic. But of course, things are only going to get bigger and better in the much-awaited prequel. In fact, House of the Dragon is going to feature around 17 dragons in just the first season. Why? Well, because the Targaryen family is nothing without their trusted fire breathers. As the show takes us through history to show us how the clan nearly tore itself apart with their thirst for power, we will also see the massive role that their own dragons played in the war. The Big Four. The first dragon that we will be introduced to in the show is called Caraxes, also known as the Blood Worm. Owned by Daemon, the dragon is a direct reflection of the prince's volatile nature. Just like his owner, Caraxes doesn't think twice before attacking and ripping his victim apart. In Daemon's own words, Caraxes likes to burn things, and his bright red appearance sure does make him look the part. Then we come to Syrax, a yellow dragon ridden by Rhaenyra, who has already emerged as a fan favorite this season, massive and powerful. Syrax is friendly and lovable, but don't be fooled because just like her owner, the dragon is always ready for a good fight, especially when she's threatened. With all her might, Syrax can rip just about anyone apart. But call it foreshadowing if you want, the only opponent that this mighty dragon cannot go up against is Caraxes. Sunfire is the third big dragon that the show will introduce to us, ridden by Aegon II, who is one of Viserys' sons. This dragon is perhaps the most stunning creature in all of Westeros. Breathing bright golden flames, Sunfire is every bit as lethal as he is gorgeous. And while he might not make an appearance till the very end of Season 1, this is a dragon that will be involved in multiple battles during the Dance of the Dragons, so we'll be seeing a whole lot of him. Lastly, we have Vhagar, the largest and most experienced dragon of them all, ridden by Laena Velaryon, the daughter of Princess Rhaenys. This is the same dragon that Aegon I used to conquer Westeros. So there's some heavy symbolism that's involved here, an important part of the Targaryen history. Vhagar is probably going to be the most important dragon that the show will feature. The line between reality and CGI. For those of you who didn't realize, it's been 11 years since Game of Thrones premiered on HBO. And while it's true that the show broke many records and was way ahead of its time, it still had some technological limitations, which is why people believe that the original show did not feature as many dragons as it could have. The truth is that the budget for all of these dragons and the fight scenes that they are featured in goes up to millions of dollars. But as time has passed, the conversation around CGI has shifted, and today, plenty of shows and movies make use of the technology like it's a piece of cake. This gives House of the Dragon an advantage to be as ambitious with the story as possible, simply because the showrunners have all the resources to support their crazy ideas. According to the director of the first season, Miguel Sapochnik, back when he was working on Game of Thrones, editing was a slow process. So even if you did shoot special effects sequences, it would take hours and hours of hard work to make them look the way that they were supposed to. But with House of the Dragon, the editors have access to faster technology that makes it easier for them to do a bunch of things at the same time. This has allowed the showrunners to focus on the things that need to be done on set and then take them in post to fix them later on. So while it's true that CGI is an important element of the show's storytelling, the director also mentioned how good CGI cannot make up for bad acting. And that's why everything here needs to go hand in hand. As far as the dragons go, Sapochnik went on to say that they didn't just focus on making the dragons look mighty. Instead, the special effects artist also worked to make everything look as realistic as possible to make sure that the audience wasn't disoriented. So, if you watch a House of the Dragon episode without CGI, you're likely to see the actors talking to a prop of a dragon's head that acts as a stand-in for them to deliver their lines and perfect their expressions. But it's usually not until after the post that the visuals of the show make sense. The devil's in the details. Now, while CGI is a crucial element of the show, the showrunners have tried their best to make everything look as organic as possible, which is why they have gone ahead and constructed entire sets around their CGI dragons and special effects instead of using green screens that can affect their actors' performances. And as far as the dragons go, since the show has so many of them, co-showrunner Ryan Condal explained how they wanted to give them all their personality. Since no two Targaryens are the same, how can the dragons be? So to make sure that the audience understands how crucial these creatures are to the Targaryen clan, every dragon in the show has their own shape, size, color, and personality. The oldest dragons of the lot look the part with their horns falling off and their skin looking much more mature than the younger ones. And as far as the younger dragons go, they're much more agile, curious, and ready to go out into the world and fight. For example, when you see Daemon with his dragon, you'll instantly see how much the two have in common. Caraxes actually never stops moving and fidgeting, and if you pay attention, you'll see that Daemon is exactly the same. The point that the showrunners wanted to make is the fact that the Targaryens treat the dragons as their family members, maybe with a tad bit more respect, even so the show needs to portray them the same way. By the end of the show, the audience will be able to distinguish between each dragon that plays a part in the story and connect with them the same way that they've already connected with the show's human characters. And that's a wrap for today's video. If you enjoyed what you saw, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more House of the Dragon related news. Until then, we'll see you next time. Bye.